Today we talk about English and whether it belongs in the United States or not. Podcast listeners, this is Lotus, and this is the Socratic Neighbors podcast, back from a unexpected hiatus. And if you, I haven't recorded any of the technical difficulties that we've had just trying to record this episode today, let alone trying to find a time for us to sit down and actually start recording again. But with me in the virtual studio, as always, is
Quick Carl,
and we're back. And Quick Carl, since I was gone so long, and since it's been my fault, I didn't get to choose a topic. So what's the topic for today before we go into small talk?
So English is the official language of the United States.
The official language of the United States. Okay, so do you want me to take the pro or yay or nay stance?
Go for it.
There's
5 things we're going to disagree and agree on. So
I'm sure we'll find something to agree or disagree on. But anyway, how are you been, Quick Carl? I know before we started recording, we were talking about me and my my career chaos. But how are you doing? How's Houston? Right. Is it still hot?
Yeah, it's always going to be hot. There's just a couple of temperatures here hot, and you're going to burn up. so that's pretty much it. But I had a nice visit in Denver, and the weather was definitely cooler at night there. So I did like that. But yeah, it's good to be back, and I miss my dog, good old Bronco. He was looking forward to seeing me, and I was looking forward to seeing him. So,
did he survive?
He survived. He was a little ragged, but he quickly grew out of it pretty fast. So
that's good.
Yeah, he looked really good. So that's good, and I enjoyed your podcast with Sister Lotus.
Yeah,
the Horse Whisperer episode.
Yeah, she. It was a good episode. I think there were things that that I brought up that she didn't think about, and then there were things that she brought up, and obviously I didn't think about. But that's the point of this podcast, I think. It's funny because some of my gamer friends disagree with me politically, or or in other aspects of even socially. Sometimes they disagree with me, and so I mean, they're always they take the interior and they're like, "What are you trying to do? Convince me?" And I said, "No, I'm not trying to convince you." I said, "You've already made a decision. Why would I try to convince you?" And then they said, "Well, why are you fighting with me?" I said, "I like the spectacle of fighting." And so
you're a pugilist at heart.
Yes, I'm a feudalist at heart. Hang on, my dad just texted me. So, yeah, my dad and I have been watching quite a bit of Formula One. I got Formula One, F1 18, for my Xbox, and I've been playing that.
Isn't that what the Marines fly? F-18s?
F-18s. Yeah, not F1 18s, F-18s, the actual birds. I'd like to actually ride around in one of those. That'd be fun.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Couple notes. We're gonna find a better time to now that my work stuff is slowed down quite a bit. We're gonna find a better time and more often to record podcasts. Unfortunately, to those of you that are still listening, I think our numbers have dropped down to 4 listeners, back from the 30 that we had. Those of you who are still listening and continue to frequent the podcast, like we've said before, this podcast is meant to be listened to pretty much at any time. Now we are going into Labor Day weekend, and this isn't a Labor Day podcast, obviously, but um, the podcast is meant to, whenever you want to pick up and listen to it, or if you want to re-listen to something, you can easily listen to it again. But we are gonna do our best to put out at least 2 to 3 episodes a month, I think. And we'll continue to work on providing good content, not just content, but good content. And we're supposed to have a guest on the show soon as well, which will be interesting because that'll be the first time we actually have multi call in for the virtual studio. But it'll be good. I'm looking forward to having I'm looking forward to having Fluffy on, and I'm looking forward to talking about gaming. So that's gonna be fun because gaming's a good part of my life. Anyway, so diving into the topic. English as a national language. I really don't think that I think that English should be the primary language, since that is the way we universally communicate, and since it's also the language of pilots. I also think that everybody should at least attempt to try to learn English that comes into the country, and it's also required as if you're trying to become an American citizen. It's not a national language, but it is required. And so I don't think that there should be a national language, because America should continue to be the melting pot that it is. But at the same time, I think English should be a requirement for going to school, becoming a citizen, learning the culture that is America. And even though America is made up of different cultures, I also postulate that we do have a common ground as far as our pride, American pride, and American ideals. And I mean, I guess that's just where I'm at on it. I don't know what brought this on. I'm assuming this is a topic that you wanted to discuss from vacation, but I don't know what brought this topic to your head.
A lot of it actually was prior to my vacation, but some things came up, and I was kind of curious about it. Now, technically, English is the official language for all government documents. So that is an official language for anything government related.
Right.
But as far as the national, I think everyone should learn English that lives here. I mean, if you go to another country, you need to learn their language. You're not necessarily going to try to speak English to you if you go somewhere else, because they have their language, and they expect you to learn their language, or they don't want to talk to you. That happens in some countries. I'm not saying all countries, but it does happen. And I think in this country, we have become such a melting pot that I really believe that English should be the official language, and that if you live here, you need to learn it. And we're not progressing in that direction, because what I see is, like, in the school systems, there are kids that are like speaking Spanish. They're not accelerating to learn English. Instead, they do teach them English, but they also teach all their other core subjects in Spanish, which isn't helping them.
Right.
So that's not. Also, if you're in public, the thing that drives me crazy is if you go to a store and the people there don't speak English, they look at you and start laughing. You just wonder if they're talking about you, for one thing. But I think if people are in public, they should speak English. I'm not a big pro advocate of, if you're sitting with somebody and you're speaking a foreign language at a restaurant to each other, that's all right, I suppose. I mean, they could be looking at you and speaking in their language, and could be talking to you and you wouldn't know it. But if you own a business and you're a foreigner, that's fine. But you need to speak English in public. If you're at home and want to speak your language at home, that's different. But you're not. I think that it should be spoken in public, and I think that it should be the official language. I mean, take Canada for an example. They've got to print everything in English and in French on all their labels because of Quebec. And
Right.
yeah, because of Quebec, they have to spend all this money printing everything in English and French. And then Quebec has the nerve to tell Canada that they want to secede from Canada and become their own country. And Canada is pretty much like, go for it. We're tired of dealing with all your crap that we got to do.
Right. Well, and I
So
mean,
I just think overall that English should be the official language, and we should be speaking it.
yeah, there's a lot of things I agree about that. It did start to frustrate me once I started seeing more Spanish ads, billboard things like billboards and advertisements on even ABC and sometimes on ESPN. You get Spanish ads on English channels. You know, I mean, they're starting a big push towards targeted areas within the United States. So, I mean, anything south of San Antonio all the way down to Brownsville, I mean, you're going to see labels that have both English and Spanish on it. I mean, you go to a Spanish restaurant, not restaurant, but Spanish, primarily Spanish supermarket or grocery store. I mean, you're going to have labels that have both English and Spanish, or primarily Spanish on there, you know?
Yeah, and in that case, I get it, because they've got a Spanish community that's probably shopping there. But if it becomes the official language, then everything has to be in English. That's what I believe.
Right.
And we have to adapt, because and we're not trying to be snobs. You want to live here, you've got to speak the official language. And you go to places like France, and they learn English in school, and they won't speak it. You talk to them in English, and they just like spit on you, basically.
Right. Well, and I mean, English is also a very difficult language, but at the same time, I think it's just I don't know what that has to do with the topic, but English. I agree with you that everything should be standardized, and when you're in a country that their primary form of communication is English, and for you not to be able to even want to learn it or speak it is a problem. I agree that schools trying to cater to specific cultures rather than teaching in English is a big problem. That I have a problem with, because you're not preparing the kids for Mexico or Spain or Brazil or anything like that. You're supposed to be preparing kids for America, and that's a huge problem within the school system in general, let alone just teaching English or Spanish. But you know, we have to cater to everybody's feelings, but at the same time, and we need to make sure that we aren't holding people back. And the only way to prevent that is to mandate an official language, you know. And
right.
I think that's I think it'd be a good way to do that. I still, for me to hold on to, oh well, you know, America is still a melting pot. I think I can understand the other side of the argument, and I agree with it, you know, that it's really difficult for anybody that doesn't speak English to get anywhere in the United States. It's very difficult, particularly when you're doing business with other businesses.
Right, exactly. You know, yeah, traveling and just going in general. I know from my own experiences being in countries like Italy and France.
You know, from your own experiences being in countries.
Yes, yeah. My own experiences being in countries like Italy and France, for example. I make an effort to get acclimated. I don't want to come over there like, well, I'm an American, and I'm going to speak English. You guys have to listen to me. So,
right.
And it's like, no, I try to be conscious of. I mean, if you're in Italy or France, Italian and French are the official languages of those countries,
Right.
and they're melting pots too. Those countries get a lot of people, foreigners moving to there too, but they don't change their language. So I'm willing to learn that language to go there, and I don't expect them to change for me, and I wouldn't. I don't. That's what I don't expect in this country. You
Right.
know, if I think that it's our language, and you have to learn it if you want to stay here.
Right. Agreed. Agreed. It is very frustrating for me working in the hospitality industry that I'm in, and particularly in Texas. When I worked in Texas, I mean, you get a lot of people that are at the entry level employees that don't speak any English, and so you have to go and find somebody that does speak English to get to translate for what you want them to do, and it's very frustrating rather than just approaching that person and saying, hey, you know, hey, can you do this for me? And then they have no idea what you're saying, and
Right. And you gotta like show them a picture or try to move your hands around
right.
and try to do something. And the other thing that cracks me up when you're trying, we do this too. I'm not. It usually happens because U.S. citizens usually do this when they try to communicate with somebody that doesn't speak English. What do they do first? They start talking louder. It's like,
Right.
I want you to do this. Okay, I couldn't understand you when you said it in a normal voice. How am I going to understand it more because you're saying it louder?
Right. Or the really slow, like really complex words. Can you please? Don't need please. You go do that.
Yeah, it
Like
sounds
it's
like Dory talking in
yes.
Finding Nemo, talking
Yeah.
to the whales.
They're not gonna know. Well, it's funny. There was some the non-English. The funniest non-English interaction I've ever had was at an airport in, I think, St. Louis, and this Italian couple had come and visited their daughter for her college graduation, and she had graduated with a master's of English, believe it or not, which is so funny. But they didn't speak a word of English, and I don't like. I get that international airports are okay. We're an airport that services international clientele. I get it. I get the whole naming of it. But at the same time, for an airport or someone at an airport not willing to find a translator for that person, I think is a bit of is difficult. So what I ended up doing is just doing Google Translate on my phone and telling them in Italian on my phone. Like,
yeah.
it just, that's the way we communicated. And so
Yeah.
then eventually I was like the only person willing to help them. So eventually they called their daughter, and the daughter talks to me, and the daughter goes, all right, so what is going on? And I said, okay, well, their flight's been delayed. They're going to get on the next one. I said, it's been rained out. That's all that's going on. I said, this is, and I told her what was going on, and then she translated, and then they came up to me and they said, they were like, grazie, grazie, grazie. It was just so funny, And so the daughter comes back. She goes, thank you for willing to help them. I said, well, you're welcome. I said, anytime. But it's just so funny, and I don't mind when you're a foreigner and you trying. They were clearly trying hard to understand and speak English, but they just, like, it's a language barrier that they just didn't have any knowledge of it.
Right. Like I had to make my mic keeps coming apart here. I had to make a phone call to I had to make a phone call.
Can't hear you. Nope. Can't hear you. May want to turn your knob on the back up. Uh-oh. Whoa.
There. Hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You hear me?
Hey,
There we go.
all right, you got me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, no, what was I talking about?
I just finished my Italian story.
Oh yeah. And when I was in France, I had to make a phone call to Germany, and I speak pretty fluent German, and so I saw talking to the guy on the phone in German, and then halfway through the conversation, he broke into English. Now he probably could tell I was an American, but he made an effort to try to talk to me in English.
Yeah.
But after he got talked to me in English for a couple sentences, he went back to talking to me in German. So that was kind of interesting. But at least we got through the whole conversation. I appreciate people trying to make an effort, even if they don't speak our language fluently. At least if they're trying to make an effort, that tells me that they want to fit in.
Right.
And I don't like it when I'm in public and I see people speaking to each other in a foreign language and then like snickering and looking at people. It's like you just feel like they're making fun of them or something.
Yeah. Well, and there's also a difficulty with people who are deaf and they can't, they can speak English, they could speak it, but they can't hear you when you're talking.
Oh yeah, right.
And so I know that there's a difficulty with that, and I know that the deaf culture here, correct me if I'm wrong, and I could be wrong, that the deaf culture here in the United States is much more prominent than it is in other countries. And so
I don't know honestly.
I could be wrong. I could be way wrong on that. But as far as my understanding goes, I think
that's one of those situations where you just gotta speak louder again.
Yeah.
I don't know. But actually talking about hearing though, just a side note, several years ago, doctors came up with a thing that can make people hear again.
Yes.
There is a procedure.
Yes.
That there's no reason for anybody to be deaf anymore.
Yeah.
But there might be candidates that can't do the surgery because of one thing or another.
Right. Well, I know that the cochlear, is it the cochlear implant that you're talking about?
I think that's probably it. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. The cochlear implant, they've made vast improvements in its ability to actually process sound information, which is fantastic. Because it used to be a cochlear implant used to only work on certain people, and now it works on pretty much every person. I mean, even a hearing person.
That would be awesome.
Even a hearing person can have it installed in their head, in their brain. I say installed like it's a piece of software.
Some people need that.
Yeah.
They need other programs in there.
Right. English. I think English is a very beautiful. I really do think English is a beautiful language. I think it's one of the more beautiful languages in the world. It's much better than Afrikaans, I will say, because I have a buddy that speaks Afrikaans, and he's like, and I was like, English sounds way better on the tongue, man. And he goes, no, it doesn't. I said, yes, it does. I said, after listening to you speak Afrikaans, it's so funny. And and he and his mom still speak fluent Afrikaans, and he goes and visits his family in South Africa sometimes. But I mean, it just he's an American citizen, and he said I had to learn it. I had to learn it to become an American citizen, and pretty much everything in the United States is in English.
Do you think people from England should, when they come over here, should learn how to speak English like we do?
People from England?
Yeah,
I think they should learn the nomenclature. I mean,
they have words for different things that we call
for sure,
but it's still English. I mean, Australia pretty much all speaks English. It's maybe the Aborigines don't, but in Canada, except for Quebec, all speaks English.
Right.
So there are a lot of countries that do, but they all got their own like dialect or their own name for things that we necessarily don't, and maybe they don't
Yeah,
have as many slang. This language of ours is based on a lot of slang.
it is. It is, and more slang words get added to the dictionary all the time. That's the thing that
Right,
frustrates
which
me.
makes it more difficult to learn English too.
Right, and that frustrates me is that Merriam-Webster and what's the other big one? They keep adding words to the dictionary.
Rocket thesaurus or something.
Yeah. I mean, they
Or
keep.
yeah, Merriam-Webster's probably the big one though.
Yeah, but I mean, they keep
America's they keep.
words to the dictionary all the time.
Well,
It's
a
like,
lot of that stuff that they're adding are words that popped up from the internet.
right.
I mean,
And it's
LOL,
like, just leave that
that's
stuff.
a word now in a dictionary.
Right. Well, and it's like, just leave that stuff on. Leave that seriously. Leave that stuff on Urban Dictionary. There's no reason to put it.
Right,
in the
right,
intro.
yeah, right. It should be an Urban Dictionary for internet terms or something.
Yeah, I mean, but anyway, yeah, no, I with English, I mean, it's frustrating for me to it is frustrating for me to have somebody that's not willing to learn English.
Yes.
That's the other thing is that like there's a few people at my work, and then there's some people that I grew up with whose parents just refused to learn English. And it wasn't for lack of it was just they just didn't want to. And it's like how are you ever gonna and they had their own lives, and they lived in a community where they didn't need to learn it. And it's like,
well, and like I said before, I don't really have a problem if they want to speak their language in their home.
Yeah.
When they're not in public, but then you've got the other situation there where if they're just speaking their language at home, and that's the only language they use at home, then the kids are just going to keep using that language, and they're not going to learn English because their parents aren't like setting a model for them to learn English.
Right. Well, I mean, there's quite a few immigrants that they had a hard time learning English, but they won't let their kids speak anything else. I know that there's a few immigration stories like that, where the parents had moved from wherever they were as immigrants to the United States, and they forced their kids to, even though their kids could understand and learn another language, and the parents between themselves spoke a different language, they still forced their kids to speak English at the dinner table, or and I think I might do, if I knew another language, I might do it with the way my buddy learned, is that my buddy learned English because his mom would speak English to him and his dad would speak only Spanish to him. So he was able to learn, and then when they were all three together, they all spoke German. So he learned like 3 languages. So at the dinner table, he learned German, and then his dad and him spoke Spanish, and then his mom and him spoke English. So he was able to learn 3 different languages. And that's a good I think that's a good method of teaching your kids different languages. But at the same time, I think there's other more valuable skills out there than just speaking multiple languages.
I know for a while there they were trying to make, like, what was it, Esperanto, the world language that everybody would learn to speak Esperanto.
I don't.
But I'll tell you something. Like you were just saying, it's okay to teach their kids other languages. I don't see anything wrong with that.
Right.
But what I'd like to see go with that is you learn about that language. When you're learning that language, you learn about the culture of the country it comes from.
Right.
Because you're not getting immersed in it if you don't do everything.
Right.
If you're just going to learn the language, it's just like learning sentence structures and words for different things. But if you understand the culture and the things that are going on and the food that they eat and their customs, if you learn that, the language can be a lot more interesting and maybe easier to learn because you're immersing yourself in that country. Right. And that's what people need to do in this country, so that they'll want to learn English and they'll learn about our customs and different things we do.
Right.
And I mean, everybody's got their own customs, and people move over here from other countries, and they keep their customs. But we have customs in this country that should be the standard.
For sure. Well, I think that it's like is it Carlos Mencia? I know he rips off a lot of people, but Carlos Mencia says, America is supposed to prepare your child for America. They're not supposed to prepare your child for Mexico or Spain or Italy or France or Britain. They're supposed to prepare your child for America. And there's a reason for that, and I have sympathy to the plight of immigrants and have sympathy to the plight of people that struggle in this world. But I don't have sympathy for you coming over to the United States and not willing to, you want to be in the United States either legally or illegally. This should be universal. If it's illegal or illegal for you to be here, you need to learn some English. Learn some English.
Well, right, exactly. And also too, you made a good point right there where you said about illegally or legal or illegally. Actually, if I was trying to get into this country illegally, the first thing I'm going to do is learn the language so I fit in a lot better and I don't get caught.
Yeah, that's never made any sense to me. That you're right. That's never made any sense to me. America is the only country where you can sneak in illegally, not speak a word of English, and nobody suspects a thing.
Right. Now, if you go in legally and you're struggling to speak the language, I get it. You're trying to become a citizen.
Right.
People are going to expect you to struggle with learning English. But the last thing I'm going to want to do is smuggle myself into a country and not be able to speak the language.
Right. I'm not gonna speak into Quebec and not try and learn French.
Right, exactly, because you'll stand out.
They'll stand out very quickly. Other than being, a little bit darker skinned than they are, but yeah.
Of course, the other thing is you might get away with it some because it is in a country that speaks English. That's just the province that speaks French. But at the same token, if you don't sound like you have a Canadian accent, that could be a giveaway.
Eh?
Exactly. I don't know. Is this? Yeah. I mean, there's a whole picture of stuff you got to do, and it's just not like I got to learn the language and I say it phonetically and I'm just really boring when I'm talking, so I never change my tone, that like that.
Right. Yeah.
And Louisiana speaks Cajun French.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
And Louisiana's got
Louisiana, because everybody, the rest of the United States says Louisiana,
or
and you go to Louisiana and they say Louisiana. And also too, they don't have counties there; they have parishes. Right. So they're hanging on to their French roots. Right. Well, and I mean, Louisiana has just a bunch of different things going for it that the rest of the United States just doesn't have,
Yeah, but English. Getting back to English being a language for this country, because of all the different dialects in this country, people supposedly are speaking English, but sometimes you can't tell.
Right.
It's like you go, yeah. I mean, like let's use my cousin Vinny for example. When he was in the courtroom, he said the two Utes. Well, the judge didn't even know what he was talking about. But in New York, Utes meant youths. Right. But where he was from, it's like, what's a Ute?
Right.
But it's still English.
Right. Well, I mean, just Ebonics. Ebonics is language, is English.
Yep.
I mean, but it's something that, it's just different. This is just a different dialect of English.
My thing is just basically, if you want to stay here, learn the language and make it official. We spend too much time trying to please everybody that moves in here with all these different translations of stuff, and the government already prints all their material in English anyway. So let's make it universal so that this is what it is, and if you're going to stay here, you need to learn it, and if you don't want to learn it, then leave. I'm serious.
Right.
And if you are willing to learn it, but you're struggling, we'll help you.
Yeah.
We're not going to turn you away just because if you're trying to make an effort.
Yeah, for sure. The school system, it bothers me a lot that, some teachers will continue to speak in both English and Spanish.
Right.
And it's
right,
like
exactly.
you are splitting a time that it takes to teach a lesson. You're spending half the time spending half the time doing twice as much work.
Right. And you're not preparing those kids, because then when they go out, they're going to be still behind.
No, you're taking twice as much time to do half the amount of work.
Right. But I'm just saying, when they get older and are ready to get out of school, they're already handicapped because they didn't get accelerated like they were supposed to.
Right. And the kids, the thing that bothers me most is that the kids that are already learning English are not going to learn Spanish because you're saying it twice. And the kids that are learning English are not going to the kids that only know Spanish are not going to learn English because you're also repeating it twice.
Right, and there's no incentive to learn English if they're already catering to you speaking Spanish.
Right. Yeah. For sure. All right. We're at 35 minutes.
35 minutes?
35 minutes. With all our technical difficulties.
Yeah. I think we've covered it pretty well.
All right. Well, thanks very much for listening this week, podcast listeners. We're going to close out, and then we'll probably do another one in a couple weeks, huh?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. All right. Have a great week, listeners, and thank you so much for listening.